Net and Mr. Brass are interviewing my 2 cents. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Could be better, could be worse.
Pretty good myself as well. Nice to see you, Mike. 2 cents.
Happy to be
Tell us
here.
all about yourself.
Oh, well, I have a channel where I give you my 2 cents on just about anything under the sun. The three primary topics I cover are economics, culture, and smart living. But then I talk about some totally random stuff every now and then. And as my classic tagline says, it's just my 2 cents. So you can take it for what it's worth.
Right. So, what led you to be a libertarian?
I guess when I think about my past political background, when I initially started getting involved in politics was under back in the Bush era, and I guess what finally got me to, what moved me toward libertarian ideology was thinking about the fact that whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or whatever country you come from, political party affiliation you have, no one's really arguing about whether or not the government should have power. They're just arguing about what the government should do with its power. And they're perfectly happy to see the government be all powerful when the government is doing the things they want. But then the moment a politician comes to power who does something they don't like, somehow that's illegitimate. All the while, though, they're the ones who are advocating the government have more power. And I guess the question occurred to me, is the problem really just that the government having power, period? What would society look like if everyone was allowed to make their own decisions and then live with the consequences of those decisions? In particular with economics, reading the book Basic Economics by Thomas Sowell really got me interested in economics. As a subject, I adopted the Austrian economics point of view and basically got to the point where I believe the non-aggression principle is logically deduced from first principles of knowing, and that there's no consistent justification, no member of government, whatever party you come from, you're never going to be able to consistently justify why you and you alone, or people who agree with you, have the right to use force against others, but people who disagree don't. So I guess that's there are a lot of different factors, but those are the first few things I'd bring up.
That's very interesting, actually. I believe what first got me into libertarianism was actually Shane Killian. And then, after getting into Shane Killian for a while, I started looking at more libertarian YouTubers. Eventually, I ran into you, then I ran into Filthy Heretic. I met another libertarian from being in my previous group, Red Pill Religion. And, and that's sort of, once I talked to them, I didn't even know I was a libertarian for a while, but once I talked to another fellow libertarian for a while, they said, yeah, you're a libertarian. And that's just sort of how I came into it. But yeah, you want to ask one of the first questions, history?
Sure. What are your feelings on the state of the world today in this post-90s cultural wasteland?
Could you ask a more loaded question?
I could, but I choose not to.
We got time.
Boy, I don't even really know where to start. Obviously, I'd say the world's messed up. It's difficult for me to narrow down one specific thing that, or where exactly I want to go when I say the world's messed up. But I guess I'm just going to go with the overwhelming support we have for socialism, for an all-powerful state that dictates every aspect of its citizens' lives. Even when you can look, the famous quote by George Santayana, "Those who don't learn their history are doomed to repeat it." If you study history, you can see these ideas are not new. They've been tried, they've failed, but for some reason, mass hordes of young people are charging forward, saying it never worked before, but don't worry, it'll work this time.
Yeah, true communism's never been tried.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, whenever someone does say that, I always tell them, of course, true communism hasn't been tried. If it were, we'd all be dead.
But another thing, just the flat out denial of reality we see in culture today. Be it there's no such thing as biological sex. There are no differences. I mean, that's one that comes immediately to mind because it's been in the news a lot lately.
72
But
genders.
yes, there's an infinite number of genders.
And the Christian right is responsible for every bad thing that's happened in the past couple centuries.
Exactly. The blatant willingness to ignore evidence, historical data, anything, all in favor of feelings and emotion.
Mhm.
So sorry, that's the best I can do with such a loaded question.
All right.
What's wrong with the state of the world today? A lot of
Yeah.
stuff. It's going to be hard to cover.
Culturally.
Yes.
Well, it's a fallen world and we can't get up.
Nah. Who's your favorite political commenter?
Another tough one. We're talking YouTube level commentator, mainstream, historical.
Both. Or all of the above.
All right. Well, obviously, some of my predecessors in the libertarian YouTubers, Mr. Dapperton, Shane Killian, were some of the first who got me into it. I do like, as far as mainstream, I do like a lot of stuff Ben Shapiro has to say. That's not to say I agree with him on everything. I definitely don't. But
Tucker Carlson.
definitely not Tucker Carlson. I used to like some of the stuff he had to say, but lately I have no idea why people even call him a right-wing figure. At best, he's center-left.
Well, you can't cuck the tuck, man.
Yeah, well, you can read my article response to him about the Luddite fallacy, which I made into a video. You absolutely can.
And
Tucker Carlson advocates that we should outlaw self-driving cars in order to preserve the jobs of Americans.
We should yeah, and I always respond back to that. Yeah, and we should outlaw regular cars because it puts people that own horses out of business.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's definitely not there on a lot of ideas, although I do love him when he talks to, like, feminists. I love his little thing that he did with Laura Wayne from Planned Parenthood.
Okay.
I thought that was funny.
What's your favorite mainstream commenter and historical?
Okay, as far as historical, let me think here. Well, I will say this: when I first got I was fairly young when I first started getting an interest in politics. Two of the people that really got me interested were Rush Limbaugh and Glenn Beck. I'd say Glenn Beck has gone downhill quite a bit since those days, but he was one of the.
That's an understatement.
Yes, but he was one of the first to get me interested. I haven't. I'll be honest. I haven't listened to Rush Limbaugh in a long time now, but those are just two names that got me interested in politics. That's not to say I share their political views, but as far as the concept of a political commentator, listening to their show on a regular basis, those are two of the first that got me interested in talking about politics.
Huh. And mainstream?
Right now, as I already mentioned, I'd probably say Ben Shapiro. Again, that's not to say I agree with him on everything, but I enjoy listening to his show.
Cool. Like, who would you say is the worst political commentator?
Cenk Uygur.
Don't know who that is.
Okay, the Young Turks.
Oh, yeah.
Anything that comes out of the Young Turks. So,
you mean the fat rhinoceros?
The one who's often been called a buffalo, yes.
Yeah, I remember watching Hunter Avalone, and he called him a greasy water buffalo.
Yes.
Him and his bitch Kyle
Kolinsky, yes. Yeah. The progressive voice is up there as well, but since the Young Turks have so much more influence, I'll go ahead and say the Young Turks. I've done a couple of response videos to them. I always when doing my weekly search for videos, I typically take a look at them.
They're the less Fox News. Out of all the contributions to the fall of the Western world, what would you say has been the worst? The far right, the far left, the economy, the SJW influenced media, the new atheist movement, the bar and entertainment being set so low, the accepted degeneracy, or what else?
All right. Wow. Again, tough question. As far as the decline of Western civilization, I'd say definitely there are a lot of things that have contributed to that. I think one thing I'm not sure I can conclusively answer the question what has the most. I think, but I would say the idea that government is inherently good, and that when people at large adopt the idea that government is inherently good, sure, it can do bad things, but it's an inherently good institution, and the power of government can change lives for the better. I feel like once society adopts that mentality, the state can only grow bigger, and when the state grows bigger, your freedoms will inevitably get taken away. So that's I'd like to focus on that in particular.
Yeah, I remember you said that you don't like, not that you don't like, but that I know you typically don't discuss religion on your more political channel. I was wondering if your personal religious beliefs as a Christian play a bit into your libertarianism, and if so, what do you think is the boundary between religion and politics, like in terms of the wall and stuff?
Okay, well, I would say the reason, well, first, just as an aside, the reason I don't tackle religious issues on my channel that much is I've just found I like to, although I do cover a lot of different stuff, obviously it's my 2 cents on a lot of different things. I like to have a few core things that I talk about, and then if and when there are other things I branch out in. I do have 2 additional channels: my 2 cents religion and philosophy, my 2 cents gaming, because it's my opinion that sometimes channels that have too many different topics, much in the words of Frederick the Great, he who attacks everywhere attacks nowhere. If you cover too many different topics, it just, you have trouble building a base of followers because you're going all over the place. And not to say that that's the case with every channel. There are some channels that do tons of stuff and succeed, but for the time being, that's what I've chosen to focus on. I would say my religious beliefs as a Christian do play very heavily into my views as a libertarian. I think it would be my view, for example, that government, in effect, tries to take the role that God should take in your personal life and in society. Although I wouldn't say that one would necessarily need to be religious to be a libertarian. Obviously, that's obviously false. There are plenty of non-religious libertarians out there. What do I think the wall should be between politics and religion? Well, I would say that's a difficult question to answer, in as much as I think there are some religious beliefs that are compatible with libertarianism, like I believe Christianity is. I believe Judaism would be. I do not believe, as I've said in my video, Why the Left Loves Islam, I do not believe that Islam as a religion is compatible with libertarianism. I understand there are some Muslims who would disagree, but my studies of the subject have convinced me that's not the case.
Atheism would also be compatible, obviously.
Yes, atheism would be compatible with libertarianism. It's interesting, though. I found in the vast majority of cases that doesn't seem to be true. You have obvious exceptions like Shane Killian, but it seems to me the vast majority of atheists, at least the very vocal ones, tend to be more on the political left, favoring a more totalitarian government. But atheism, just in general, the lack of belief in God, or not believing there is no God, however they want to define it, it's not clear to me that is necessarily connected with any particular political viewpoint.
Go ahead.
Okay, sorry, I've said quite a bit there. If you could repeat the original question, just remind me what I haven't covered so far.
No, I think you actually did cover basically everything I was asking in the question.
Have you heard of the coming theocracy, though?
heard of the a specific movement called the Coming Theocracy?
No, basically, it's sort of a joke that I came up with because I compared like there is a new atheist talking point really that like the Republicans want to make a literal Christian theocracy, and like so, I always compare them to end times Christians, like end time alarmist Christians.
Yeah, the what's his name guy who said Jesus was coming back May 2011 or
yeah, I compare them to that because I said like for almost 200 so years, like there have been people that have worried about a theocracy, like a Christian theocracy coming into the government, and guess how many times that's happened? 0. So I always just tell them the same things I tell end times Christians. I say, all right, tell me a date that it's going to happen, and that you can be held accountable for if it doesn't happen, and you can look like a moron.
And who's going to run this theocracy?
Yeah, it's funny. A theocracy, technically speaking, would be a nation ruled by God. Whatever they're talking about would be a nation ruled by religious leaders or by a church, effectively, which seems to me would just be another form of totalitarian government bearing the name of a particular religion. We've already seen that in the various Islamic empires throughout history, but
yeah,
the functional difference between such a government and any other dictatorship would be null, I'd say.
Well, I mean, just remember, man, like, I remember the atheists will say that, well, look, Sweden and, like, all these Nordic countries, they're so atheistic and less religious. I said, some of them also have state churches. I'm like, you might want to, like, they're not secular. Like, at least not, like, they seem to define secular as having more atheists per capita.
Mm-hmm.
Which is sort of like defining theocracy as merely having more, like, let's say, Christians per capita.
To my knowledge, the only 3 officially atheistic states in history were the Soviet Union, Mao's China, and Cambodia under Pol Pot.
And North Korea.
I guess, yes, North Korea.
Yeah, they also try to claim that they want to blame religion so badly for the world's problems that they'll try to say that the communist dictators in Soviet Russia, Mao's China, Pol Pot's Cambodia, and today's North Korea actually worship their dictators as gods.
Yes, despite the fact that the state religion is atheism, but although I would say if there is no God, then in the minds of those dictators, they are in effect God, and I would argue that every government inevitably tries to become God.
Yeah, but not in the way they define it.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's just funny. It's because, like, I mean, what they would be legitimately talking about is sort of like how the Egyptians and the Romans did it, where their leaders were legitimately considered like demigods.
Yep, the pharaohs, the Caesars, and them, and the Chinese, Japanese emperors.
But I mean, yeah. But you never even actually see that because it's not like any of them were claimed to be of divine origin.
The terminology has changed, but the principle hasn't. Even though we don't call our leaders gods anymore, functionally, we treat them as such. You have various ways of praying to the government by voting, by calling your congressman. You express your wishes to the government, ask it to fulfill your needs, to give you money and things you want. And if you appease the government enough, perhaps they will grant your wish and give you health care and welfare and whatever else. But you better not disobey the government, or else they'll send their enforcers to punish you.
Yeah, I mean, basically, the prison system is like hell. You could say.
So, metaphorically speaking, yes, but yes, I would say, and whatever the government has special authority that no one else has. When the government issues laws, it's different than when you make statements. The government statements are
come with the
divinely issued, so to speak. So yes, I would say every government, if you define government as a body with a monopoly, with the perceived legitimacy to use force against others, even though no one else does, inevitably it grows in size and seeks to become God in the eyes of its people, whether it uses that terminology or not.
All right. I also noticed another funny trend that goes on in your videos. Basically, I was going to ask, what's your favorite bikini model?
Oh no, that's a tough question. I'm gonna say, like I said, we're gonna go with the classics. I'll say Cindy Crawford. Today, probably Kate Upton. She's still the one in my channel banner.
Fine options, man. Fine options. Can't go wrong with them.
Nope. Well, while we're in that territory, I love when you when you did videos on Ariana Grande and Alyssa Milano and all those other feminists.
Oh, yes, I quite frequently. I have a lot to say about feminism, and I have a lot to say about feminist celebrities. My video about Natalie Portman is to date my most popular video. Natalie Portman's feminist fail. It has something like 212,000 views.
Give us all you have to say.
But feminism?
Yep.
It's stupid, and it's obviously false. When you have to scream it at the top of your lungs and beat into submission anyone who disagrees, you know you're dealing with something wrong. I think
oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, when people ask me what's the most dangerous of religion in America, I say feminism.
Yes. And I mean, if you think of feminism, essentially has become women have to be superior to men in every aspect of life, which no matter what it is, women have to be superior to men. Most recently, women soccer players better make more than male soccer players, even though the Women's World Cup makes billions of dollars less than the Men's World Cup. It is obviously true. It is a scientific, objective fact that there are differences between men and women. The louder you have to scream that there are no differences, the more it shows you really do believe that there are. And I think back to one of my favorite quotes by C.S. Lewis, where he said, anyone who has to tell you he's better, this is a paraphrase, but the quote was something to the effect of, anyone who has to tell you he's better than you doesn't really believe it. Does a dog ever feel the need to convince a toy dog that it can bark louder? And his point being, if you actually believe you are better than someone else, you would not feel the need to tell that person. If you have to tell him, it shows you don't really believe it, and you're trying to convince yourself, not everyone else. And the example I give is, imagine LeBron James going around to a bunch of elementary school basketball teams, telling all the children he's a better basketball player. Well, how absurd. Everyone knows he's a better basketball player than the vast majority of people, and certainly children. He doesn't need to say it because everyone already knows it. If you constantly feel the need to tell people, if you constantly need to scream it at the top of your lungs, you get angry. Your face turns red and you get angry when people suggest otherwise. That just shows me you don't really believe it. In the case of feminists, women are the same as men. Not only are that used to be the message. Women are exactly the same as men. Now it's just women are flat out superior to men at everything. Which, granted, there are things that women are inherently better at than men are. But it is equally true there are things that men are better at than women are. Relationships
is one thing that women have over men.
Yes, relationships between men and women tend to thrive when certain gender roles are conformed to. And as much as the feminists might try to scream otherwise, it's not going to change the reality. And I think the growing MGTOW movement is proof positive that feminism doesn't work. More and more men are just checking out and saying, until women fix this, I'm not dealing with women.
And speaking of which, what's your take on the tranny sports issue?
Transgender men who believe themselves to be women are not women. They should not be allowed to compete in women's sports because they have an obvious biological advantage. Honestly, it disgusts me that they would even want to do that, because in at least a few of these cases, it's obvious that these people didn't discover their transgender identity until they realized they weren't going to win in the men's division. So they suddenly discovered they're women so they could go blow away the competition. It's in my mind, it's like the kid who just discovered he didn't make the high school basketball team, going to play basketball with 4-year-olds so that he can feel like he's awesome.
Well, just remember, man, I self-identify as a horse, therefore I can go into the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah, exactly. And the sad part is you can't parody this stuff. The moment you make jokes like that, somebody goes and actually does it.
No, one day I'm going to walk into a women's bathroom, and when they look at me weird, I'm just going to say I identify as woman.
And like I said, you can't parody this stuff. That has already happened.
I mean, you definitely have the hair for it, man.
Yeah. Heard recently this tranny competed Olympic sports and was the first woman or man or whatever to win something, and it ended up being tranny.
Yes. I know there's a prevalent case right now at a high school. There's a girl who's suing. She was knocked. If there had been 2 less competitors, she would have qualified for the state finals. And the 2 competitors that pushed her out were both biological boys who identify as women. And I say, go for it.
I love that. I mean, well, you have to remember they are obviously transphobic.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
is it like, I know conservatives do something similar, like where they might call, like, I mean, I've been called a spawn of Satan by conservatives, although I would say that sort of name calling thing seems to happen more on the left. Would you seem to agree with that?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I didn't quite hear.
Oh, basically, like, you know how the left has these sort of things that they just call you, like,
Racist.
Yeah, sexist,
sexist, bigoted, homophobic,
transphobic.
Yes.
You know, I believe, like, I know some conservatives have that, like, a popular thing among conservatives is basically to call anyone that disagrees with the whole Israel thing anti-Semitic.
Yes, and I would agree that's that term gets thrown around way too often. Now, I do think there is such a thing as anti-Semitism, but it's definitely thrown around more than it needs to be.
And with the left, it's racist, homophobic, and sexist.
Mm-hmm. No, I've always found the irony being they want to say there are fundamentally no differences between men and women, yet transgender people feel the need to get surgery to make themselves look more like the biological sex of their choosing, or they need to wear the clothing of that biological sex. Well, if there really is fundamentally no difference between the biological sexes, why is it that you feel need to try to make yourself look more like one or the other?
Good point. I mean, and I also said, like, if gender is just in your brain, then why can't you just make your gender, like, conform to your biological sex? Yeah. Now, if they say that, well, I mean, it's in your brain, well, then you're ultimately saying it is biology because the brain is biology. I mean...
Oh, look, certain these specific ancient cultures may or may not have had concepts of different genders. Therefore, it's okay. I'm like, yeah, they also degraded women and sacrificed to a myriad of false idols and owned slaves. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny when people say, well, these kinds of things existed back in ancient Rome or ancient Greece and all that. Yeah, those cultures also really didn't have a problem with pedophilia. So,
yeah.
I mean, doesn't prove it's right, doesn't prove it's wrong either. If you're going to make an argument for why that should be the case, you can't just appeal to what people used to do.
I remember the Romans were disgusted with it, but they'll argue that certain Native American tribes did. Mm-hmm. And then there's the Aborigines who castrated like little boys, and then the shamans will take turn fucking the boy while he's still just being castrated with blood and semen everywhere, and they would drink it into some sort of potion.
Yeah. Sounds like my Pornhub history.
I've always said I think it's Greek mythology. It's been a while since. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is Greek mythology. What's the story was when mankind was first created, we were all giants with both sets of genitals, and then Zeus, or whatever god it was, thought it would be funny to split them into 2 different genders. And now the reason men and women always want to have sex is because we're actually trying to merge back into that being we used to be.
Yeah, even Aristotle himself said that women are incomplete men.
I mean, it's sort of, yeah, it is funny with that. I actually love mythology. I actually did a series on that. Um, but yeah, another question I wanted to get into you with is that I've noticed that you have a history of going after both conservatives and liberals. Which would you see is a bigger threat currently in America currently?
I mean, honestly, I think as a libertarian anarcho-capitalist, I think the threat is seeing the state as the solution, because there are times, like when it comes to like ethically, I do end up agreeing with conservatives on a lot of issues. Take, for example, drug use. I think, generally speaking, doing drugs is stupid and will have negative consequences in your life. But by the same token, if you go further than that, say, okay, if that's true, shouldn't the government outlaw drugs? Well, then what happens when someone else comes along who says, well, you know what, I think, pick what you will. Chocolate is unhealthy. Well, you just said drugs are bad for you. Well, chocolate's bad for you too. That should be illegal. What principled reason are you going to be able to give as to why it's okay to outlaw the one, not the other? And one thing that comes to mind, internet censorship. People on the left and the right are both talking about how internet censorship is a problem. Of course, on the left, they think there's not enough of it. There's too much hate speech out there. We need stronger government intervention to squash out hate speech. The conservatives say it's these big, giant tech corporations that are censoring free speech. We need the government to step in and regulate the internet so that these giant tech firms can't do that anymore. What people are ignoring is that both sides are now in unison crying out for the government to have more control of the internet. And that's not going to end well, no matter whether it's enacted by the conservatives or the liberals. So I would say which is more of a threat? I think the threat is seeing the state as something good, something that will actually be good for you and your freedom in the long run. I mean, obviously, given my own personal views, I'm inclined to think leftism is a greater threat. But I'd say ultimately, it's the threat will come through the state, not through people who simply hold leftist views.
Another one, as I'd like to say, is what do you think about the claim that that Republicans are a small government party?
Demonstrably false by history. If I wrote an article about this on my website, my2centsvideos.com, why government elections are a farce, and then I did make an audio version that's on my YouTube channel. But if you examine history, you'll find that no matter who is sitting in the White House, no matter who controls Congress, two things always happen every presidential term. Spending increases and the government increases in the scope of its authority. I challenge anyone to show me one government regulation that was ever repealed that wasn't replaced by at least two additional regulations. One government agency that ever opened its doors that then closed it, or at least wasn't replaced by an equivalent agency. And whether it was Republicans in the White House, whether it was Democrats, this is always the case. And honestly, it's in, like, I'm not going to say that Republicans or Democrats are more evil. I think obviously there are certain Republican politicians and certain Democratic politicians that have both done really horrible things. But one thing that I found more insidious about about the Republican strategy is take Trump's tax cuts, for example. Everyone in conservatism talked about how great it was that Trump cut taxes, how great that was going to be for the economy. Well, as Ron Paul and others pointed out, the tax cuts are not met with a corresponding drop in spending, which means that in order to cover the government debt, the Treasury is going to have to issue more debt securities. When it issues, and if you it's beyond the scope of this conversation to explain exactly how this works. So I would say that Mike Maloney's series, Hidden Secrets of Money, explains this process well. But basically, whenever the government issues more debt securities, what in effect happens is the Federal Reserve prints more money out of thin air and then buys those debt securities, giving the government new money that didn't exist before, which lowers the value of the dollar. So even though Trump gave us tax cuts, certain people don't have to pay more taxes. This inevitably results to cover the increased government spending. The government's just going to have to print more money. When it does that, the money you have will now be worth less. So even though the government didn't technically take any money that you had in your bank account, the money in your bank account is now worth less. And thus it was still a wealth transfer from the people to the government, no different than if they just taxed it outright. So are Republicans small government? They claim that they are, but if you look at history, if you look at politicians' actual voting record, you'll find that when push comes to shove, they're just as big government as Democrats, and that's because the state cannot. There is no such thing as a small, limited government. When you put people to act in their own self-interest, and when you give certain people authority that other people don't have, inevitably they will use that for their own interests, which will inevitably lead to the growth of the state.
Yeah, I forgot to follow up earlier that my favorite political commenters on YouTube are Black Pigeon Speaks and Computing Forever.
Okay, I have a great deal of respect for both of them. Again, that's not to say I agree with everything they say, but
Right.
It's hard to pick just one because I do follow so many different commentators. There are very few that I watch every single piece of content they put out, but I definitely watch at least a few Black Pigeon Speaks videos every month. Dave Cullen, he puts out a lot of good content.
And your disagreements?
I'm sorry, do you want to know some of the things I disagree with them with?
Sure.
Okay, let's take those two, for example. Black Pigeon Speaks and Dave Cullen. Both of them have voiced support for some form of government intervention with censorship on the internet. In particular, an internet bill of rights. I know initially Dave Cullen talked about regulating the internet as a public utility. Black Pigeon Speaks has talked about regulating YouTube and other social media sites as publishers, not as platforms. But I actually wrote a response piece to Black Pigeon Speaks, on which you can find is on my website. It's called "Are Libertarians Holding the Door Open for the Radical and Rabid Left?" And that was using Black Pigeon Speaks' own terminology. But I think I disagree with him. I again think that when you the only reason these big tech firms have gotten as big as they are and are able to have as much power as they have is because they are in effect working with the state. If we introduce more regulation to try to rein them in, all it will do is solidify these larger platforms as government sanctioned platforms and make it next to impossible for new startups to compete with them, which is what they really want. So I think the answer to dealing with internet censorship is the free market, not government regulation. And that's one major point of disagreement I have with both Black Pigeon Speaks and Dave Cullen.
You also mentioned that you have a gaming channel. What are your favorite games?
One word, Pokemon.
Of course.
Yes, so did you see the Detective Pikachu movie?
Unfortunately, I have not yet seen it. I will probably... I'll be honest, I don't go to the movie theater much anymore. Not because I don't enjoy movies, but because tickets have gotten so darn expensive, it just makes more sense to wait till I can rent it on my Xbox.
And there's a lot less good movies nowadays.
That's an understatement. Yes, I've not seen the Detective Pikachu movie. However, I've played every Pokemon game since Red and Blue, the main series games anyways. If you look at my gaming channel right now, I've got some Pokemon Fire Red, some Let's Go Pikachu. I'm planning on streaming some classic Pokemon Silver here once I find the time. I also like the Halo series quite a bit, but I'd say Pokemon and Halo are the only two series that I follow religiously. I've definitely played a lot of other games, but yeah, Pokemon definitely.
I never got into the games. Like I've been addicted to the anime in the late 90s and the early 2000s.
Okay. I also watched the original Pokemon anime.
Yeah.
I am amazed that the anime is still going after 20 years and Ash Ketchum is still a 10-year-old boy, but they keep it going.
And Team Rocket.
That's sort of like the complaint about The Simpsons. The Simpsons have been on for 30 years?
Yes. But you see, to some degree... go ahead.
Team Rocket still gets their ass kicked every single episode.
Yes. To some degree, The Simpsons, Family Guy, those kind of shows, it makes sense for the characters not to age because it's, solely comedy and doesn't really have any unified plot connecting the seasons. Pokemon, however, is, a cartoon, is about Ash Ketchum traveling from region to region, beating gym leaders, having all these experiences that take place in temporal succession. You can take any 2 episodes of The Simpsons, watch them out of order, and it doesn't really make a difference. Pokemon, that's not the case. So it makes sense for me that Ash would age.
If it makes you feel any better, Avatar: The Last Airbender, each month lasted a year.
Okay.
because each season was took place during a few months.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, I thought it was just very. I asked because like I couldn't really like I actually thought the movie was pretty good. It's just that the person that they had playing the voice and eventually he starred in it, like at the end. It's the same guy that played Deadpool.
Yes, Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah, I just can't take it seriously with him.
Ryan Reynolds is a pretty hilarious actor.
Well, I mean, it's not that he's a bad actor. It's just that I can only associate him with Deadpool.
Okay, I can see that too.
I mean, it's sort of like if you see the actor that plays Steve Urkel in a movie. It's like, I mean, it's like, you can say, well, he's playing a different character and he's older, but you still see Steve Urkel there.
Well, you can still, like, Hugh Jackman's one of those actors where you just identify him as Wolverine, but he can play other roles very well.
Yes, I would agree. It's funny you should mention that because just a couple weeks ago I watched The Greatest Showman for the first time, and there was someone I was watching it with made the comment. Are you familiar with that movie? First,
No.
okay, the Greatest Showman. It was a musical based on the life of P.T. Barnum, and Hugh Jackman played Barnum, and one of the other main characters is played by Zac Efron. And it's a musical. There's the scene where they're in a bar dancing and singing, and someone I was watching with said Wolverine and Troy Bolton are dancing and singing, and I laughed hysterically.
Oh, that's funny. I actually remember. It's like I do remember. Hugh Jackman actually played as I can't remember what his name. Van Helsing.
Yes, he did.
And I believe this was before he became Wolverine, or it could have been.
No, it was between.
Yeah, I just remember it. Just like I just can't take him. Like he's just one of those actors where he's just stuck forever as a certain role because that's just the only role you can see him as.
One of the Night of the Museum movies played a joke on that. He was he was in a Shakespeare play, and then he was like, "Hey, do the Wolverine."
And it's like he said, "I'm Hugh Jackman, not Wolverine." And it's just like it's funny. Like I mean, I always found that's funny in acting is like it's because you sort of have this balance that you have to maintain where you can't be too bad because people will make fun of you and no one will hire you. But you also don't want to be too good that you're solidified with this one particular character because then again, no one will hire you because people will never be able to associate you with any other character outside of it.
Well, he wasn't bad in The Fountain. If you haven't seen that one, you should.
Well, I mean, the whole point of like being an actor is like, you can play multiple different characters, and if people can only associate you with one character, that sort of kills your career.
Unless you're Tom Cruise.
Well, of course, he's the exception to everything. It's because he has Scientology money.
Yeah. Tom Cruise is the one guy who successfully plays the same character in every movie he's in, and somehow no one seems to care.
There's one actor, I can't think of him off the top of my head, but there's this one actor who plays the same character in every movie.
Tom Cruise.
Or I think it was Mel Gibson, or it's the same plot with every movie he directs, almost every movie.
I mean, that's sort of like Jackie Chan. Jackie Chan pretty much, like, in every movie he's in, he's basically the same character, just like, it's the same plot.
But he can pull it off. That's Hong Kong action cinema.
Well, yeah. Well, then, he actually pays for his own insurance because legitimately no other company will get him.
Come to think of it, Bruce Lee did also, but he can get away with it.
Well, yeah. But yeah, anyway, let's just get back onto the politics thing.
We got out in the weeds.
Okay, then I'm going to say it looks like we're coming up on having been streaming for an hour here. I'm not going to be able to go too late.
Oh, okay. If you don't have any more questions left, we'll read from the live chat.
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. And just to let you know, I did tweet out that the interview was going on, but it looks like didn't draw too many people in, unfortunately.
They'll show up later. Utopia Buster says, Christian anarchy hasn't been tried either. A much more favorable political ideology than communism.
Is that
He
a question?
No, it's just a comment. He also says no real American is going to purchase a self-driving car unless by force. And considering the state of the world expressed by these libertarians, I don't see how they are convinced libertarianism could work solely based on that evidence.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess I'm still struggling to find out. Those sound to me like opinions on his part, not really questions.
Yeah, I read opinions too.
Okay.
And the current state of political atheism, or trademark skepticism, is currently entrenched in SJWism.
Which I would say I agree with. Again, there are atheist libertarians like Shane Killian, who I appreciate, despite the fact that I disagree with him on atheism, I do appreciate his work a lot, but he seems to be the exception. I found quite often atheists end up being statheists in that they are very pro big government, and if not, outright SJW.
Well, they have a God gap that a government can only fulfill.
Yeah, exactly.
If they can't worship God, they have to worship something, and it's unfortunately the government.
Utopia Busters says Halle Berry is the finest woman to ever grace this planet. One of them.
Well, that's nice, but again, opinion, not question.
Yeah, I read opinions also.
Of course.
As long as it's going into in her bikini model stuff.
Cindy Crawford forever.
Bob Smith says, me likey Halle Berry, especially in Catwoman. That movie was terrible, but yeah, I liked her in the Flintstones. That's when I first noticed her.
Yeah. The only good thing about the Catwoman movie was simply her in that costume. That was about it.
You sexist. Bob Smith says Michael Jordan is the GOAT, whatever that means.
Oh, I think that has to do because you said about LeBron James being able to, in the basketball players.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Jordan, Shaquille O'Neal will always be the best.
Well, as long as it's not a free throw contest, then Shaquille O'Neal will always lose.
So long as Space Jam is still a thing, Michael Jordan will always be the best.
Well, until Kobe Bryant eventually does a movie of that.
Utopia Busters says, we're arguing this wrong. There are natural women and unnatural women, and never the twain are equal.
There is, all women are natural. Pretty much list, what would an unnatural woman be? An angel?
Probably.
Really, it's sort of like how I always see, people say that homosexuality is natural. I said, well, yeah, so is cancer. I'm like, something being natural in of itself does not tell its moral properties.
And I would question what you mean by natural in that regard. Are you just saying that it occurs in nature, or it has a specific function? Because in the case of homosexuality, you can argue, yes, it occurs in nature. It does not promote the propagation of the species. So in that respect, it would not be natural.
Fair enough. Yeah.
He also says several girls are suing. Transphobia is a made-up word and nothing to do with this disambiguation.
And I believe that was we were talking about the high school girl who's suing because she lost her spot at the track meet thanks to the two boys competing.
Yeah.
Yeah, transphobia is a thing. It's not made up. It's just that the left, because they over-exaggerate everything and call anyone that disagrees with them on anything these names, the real transphobia gets buried, which is a shame, really.
Same with homophobia and racism.
Yes.
That's the one thing that hates the left with vehement passion. Because, words like racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, all these words, they used to be such impactful and they used to actually designate a real serious thing. Now it's just basically it's just basically another word for, oh, you disagree with me on X political thing.
Mm-hmm. Or imagine, like, think about the Me Too controversy. How many real rape victims are going to be doubted now because the Me Too heresy has made just about every claim of being rape suspect?
Yeah, I just think that's awful. I mean, although I will say, because we go up to the left on this more often, I'll say with conservatives, it can be just as bad when it comes to anti-Semitism, because, like, and it's even funnier when conservatives do it because they say they hate it when the left does it, but yet they do it themselves. Because basically, like, if you disagree with them on anything involving Israel, you're anti-Semitic, and I'm like, no, you can just have a political disagreement.
No, you can criticize Israel and not be anti-Semitic. To be anti-Semitic would specifically, you would have to specifically target Jews and Jewish people as a whole being responsible for something. Now, I think in the case of Israel, it's a bit more complicated because many of Israel's critics are in fact anti-Semitic, but just criticizing Israel in and of itself does not make you anti-Semitic.
Like Ilhan Omar.
Yeah, Ilhan Omar is an anti-Semite. I will say that without apology. When her assertion that Jewish money is the only reason anyone supports Israel, I mean, that is an example of actual anti-Semitism.
By Jewish money, she means shekels, of course, right?
Of course. But, or suggesting that Americans with Jewish Americans have dual loyalty between Israel and the United States. I mean, I know Jewish people who hate the state of Israel. So just making such a broad generalization like that about Jews, that is anti-Semitic.
That's part of the hypocrisy, and along with the Ariana Grande, like as you said, shaking her ass on stage and singing songs about glorifying casual sex and stuff like that.
But then she gets mad when someone approaches her boyfriend and says, "You're so lucky to be hitting that," and she's like, "I'm not a piece of meat." Oh yeah, well, could have fooled me with all the songs you're doing.
Guys, I'm being sexualized. Stop it.
Well, also sexualizing yourself. Yeah. It's feminism logic, which is an oxymoron.
I noticed her on this show one time, Sam and Cat, like spinoff of.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Spinoff of Carly, which is itself a spinoff of Drake and Josh, but which is itself a spinoff of the Amanda Show, but which is itself a spinoff of all that, but.
Yeah, every Disney or Nickelodeon show is in one way or another based on something they did 10 years ago.
Yeah, but anyway, she seems so innocent, like her acting, but turns out she's a freak in real life.
Oh yeah, she's all into Kabbalah now, along with Madonna.
That's lovely.
One of my favorite internet memes is that picture that was caught where I forget what event she was at, but Bill Clinton was there, and she's dancing on stage, and the cameraman caught a picture of Bill Clinton, like just ogling her. And the look on his face is priceless.
Yeah. I always found it funny because people always talked about how sexual Donald Trump is, but yeah, if you bring up Bill Clinton, they're like, oh, well, that's different. I'm like, yeah, it's different because he was on your team.
Yeah, Bill Clinton has no less than 24 women who have accused him of either assaulting them or at the very least having a consensual affair with him. Members of the Arizona State Police have admitted that when he was governor, state troopers were instructed to, like, when they arrested young, attractive women, they were given the option they could go back to the governor's mansion in exchange and, have a escapade with Governor Clinton in exchange for not getting a ticket or whatever the case may be.
Well, I mean, the Clintons have plenty of skeletons in their closet. It just happens all the skeletons are the people that work for them.
And I also love the way you rip on Cortez. She never shuts the fuck up on Twitter.
I'll tell you this: AOC is a puzzle I will never solve. Is she really as stupid as she seemed to be, or is she some sort of evil genius pretending to be stupid towards a greater end? We'll never know.
Yeah. I mean, I remember Esoteric Entity actually made that point where he said he didn't want to call her stupid too much because he was wondering, probably this is just an act.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's so incredibly dumb. It's like it's impossible to tell. How are you? It's at that point the difference between genius and stupidity is
Well, I mean, you have to remember, man. Donald Trump is like Donald Trump himself wants to bring about a Christian theocracy,
Oh yes, of course.
even though he's probably the least religious president we've had since Jefferson.
It's interesting you should say that because I wouldn't exactly say Jefferson was unreligious, but I know he's called a deist. However, I wouldn't say he was necessarily unreligious.
He was more of a Unitarian.
Well, his cult of personality doesn't seem that different from a lot of other presidents who agree with the far right.
Well, I mean, just remember, man, his deportation is so bad. Oh, please don't mention Obama. Please don't mention his deportation.
All right.
No.
I hate to interject. We've been going for more than an hour, though. So if we could quick wrap up.
Oh, okay.
I do have to get going.
All right.
All right.
One
we
more comment.
Everything we need to.
Oh, one more comment from Utopia Buster. He says, "I'm a black Christian constitutional conservative. Try walking in my shoes for a day." And a guy pretending to be a woman is unnatural.
Agreed.
Okay. Any closing thoughts and where the dear audience can find you?
My channel, if you search My 2 Cents, it used to be the first thing that came up until PBS started some channel called 2 Cents and got like 150,000 subscribers in the first 5 days. So it's the second channel that comes up when you type My 2 Cents in. Otherwise, youtube.com/c/My 2 Cents videos, or check out my website, my2centsvideos.com, where all my videos have the sources, all the citations I have in my videos can be found on each video's corresponding blog post. I also have plenty of articles that I've written there as well. I'm on BitTubers, BitChutes. You can look if you're interested in all the platforms I'm on. Go to my2centsvideos.com and hit the About section. Here I'll put that link in the chat here.
All right. Closing thoughts, Brass?
Yes, I wanted to say that I thought this was a very good conversation. It was very nice having My 2 Cents on here. I've been wanting to have him on and people like Filthy Heretic just to have. I feel like it's an interesting thing in our politically charged nature in America, and I think it's good to show that there is more than just conservatism and liberalism in this.
All right.
All right, this has been HistoryNet and Mr. Brass. Also, we're thinking about renaming the channel Purple Pill Philosophy. If you are in favor of that or not, just let us know in the comments. And this has been an interview with My 2 Cents. Take him for what he's worth. Subscribe to him, and see you next time.